It ain't JY's flow without tight rhymes. It ain't a Pittsburgher without the fries from the nation's heartland like mom's apple pies.
And welcome into the Yinzer Crazy Podcast. The day is Monday, February 8th. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are sponsored by Steel City Wheelhouse and, of course, supported by YinzerCrazy.com. My name is Mike. You can follow me and my colleagues on Twitter at YinzerCrazyShow. And if you happen to miss it last night, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are Super Bowl champions for the first time since 2003 when they beat the Oakland Raiders. Last night, of course, they beat another AFC West team, the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a team that hadn't made the playoffs since 2008. And if there was a shadow of a doubt in your mind that Tom Brady was not the GOAT, I think we can firmly cement that. Steeler fans like myself were always holding on to things like Spygate or Bill Belichick is the reason he's winning all of these games. But listen, it's over, guys. Unfortunately, the debate has come to an end. The guy went to a new franchise in a pandemic, and he won the Super Bowl at age 43. It's not like he beat slouches either. Outside of the Washington football team's Taylor Heineke, who played really well, on his path, he beat 3 future Hall of Famers. Drew Brees and the Saints, Aaron Rodgers and the Packers in his stadium, and then Patrick Mahomes, of course, in Brady's own stadium in Tampa down there, Raymond James, just yesterday, to win his 7 Super Bowl rings. That's one more than the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise, and man, oh man, does that shit hurt to say. Anyways, the NFL season may be over, but of course, our NFL coverage does not stop here. We have a guy on today's show that many believe should be in the Hall of Fame, like Brady will be someday, and those quarterbacks I mentioned. He's certainly in the Yinzer Crazy Hall of Fame. He's one of the greatest linebackers in a very rich lineage to ever play for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Levon Kirkland. He's joining me in just a minute or two here. And, of course, he was a guy that played in a Super Bowl in the 90s against the Dallas Cowboys. It didn't go the Steelers' way, but I still got to pick his brain about the run-up to that game and what things were like and what he was experiencing the week before the Super Bowl while it's still fresh on everybody's minds. He's also a guy that works around his alma mater, Clemson, very closely currently. So I got to ask him about some individuals on that Clemson football team that the Steelers might be interested in drafting in just a few months here as we really are starting to shift our attention to the NFL draft. And they have a pretty damn good running back named Travis Etienne that you might start to want to get familiar with if you're a Steelers fan. He fits Matt Canada's offense, and he should be around in pick 24. And Levon Kirkland knows a thing or two about Travis Etienne, so stay tuned for that. We also have some much more with him, including some deep words, thoughts, and just a lot of emotion dedicated to his brother, the late Kevin Greene, of course, former Steelers linebacker that passed away tragically just a handful of months ago. I want to let you guys know that on the site this week, YinzerCrazy.com, we have some really exciting things. Of course, I mentioned some more NFL draft series continuing. I have already done 3 player profiles. Last week I did Boston College tight end Hunter Long. If you haven't checked it out, go check that out now. This week I'm going to finally profile an offensive lineman. It's taken long enough. They're a bland, vanilla position, but you saw last night the Kansas City Chiefs, Eric Fisher, their starting left tackle, was hurt, and it probably cost them a championship potentially because they could not block the Buccaneers for their lives. Patrick Mahomes was running absolutely for his life all night, and you need good tackles and guards in this game of football to win. It's a game that's won in the trenches, and if the Steelers aren't able to do that next year, you can probably pencil in a 9-7, 8-8 type season, and we'll see the Steelers football team we saw in the latter half of 2020 opposed to the 11-0 team we saw in the beginning. So we'll have that, of course, some more Pens coverage as they look to get back on track. This Thursday will be their first game this week. And some coverage dedicated to the Pirates, of course, as we continue to talk about the potential of Kumar Rocker and this rebuild Ben Cherington has going on in Pittsburgh. All right, guys, it's time to get into our guest. I'm always super thrilled, as you know. Those are my 2 favorite things to say, because every time we get a podcast guest, it's a home run. And this is no other. It's Levon Kirkland, former Steelers linebacker, guy who had a long way in inventing the Blitzburg defense. He'll tell you all about that and why he feels like this Steelers team may or may not have lost their identity moving forward. Take a listen. Hope you enjoy. Welcome back into the Yinzer Crazy podcast, of course supported by YinzerCrazy.com and sponsored by Steel City Wheelhouse. If you were a Steelers fan raised by the defense in the 90s, I'm sure you were a fan of this gentleman who was kind enough to join us on the show. He's a 1990s All-Decade Team player and a two-time Steelers team MVP, former linebacker Levon Kirkland. Levon, how are you, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
It's great to have you. Obviously, the Super Bowl is fresh on everybody's minds, so I think the first thing I want to do, if you allow me, is take you back a trip down memory lane to that 1995 Super Bowl. I know it might be a bit painful. You guys lost to the Cowboys 27-17. But I want you to tell me a little bit about your Super Bowl experience. Obviously, it's a lot different in today's culture. You guys didn't have the social media and things of that nature. So how was that kind of week, 2 weeks leading up to the game for you?
Yeah, the Super Bowl for me, was a wonderful experience. It's something that I think every young kid that ends up playing in the NFL dreams about doing. And I was very fortunate to be with a team and organization that made it that far. So it was an amazing experience. Even the week before we go down there, practice is just a lot of fun. Everybody's really focused on what to do, and you're just embracing the moment. You know, when you get that opportunity to go to the Super Bowl, you just embrace it. And I just remember embracing the whole moment. And when we went down there was a lot of activity going on. And it was a good balance between being focused on the football game and practice, and also, having a little bit of free time and enjoying the festivities that comes with the Super Bowl. So my time there and my Super Bowl experience was outstanding, and I will always remember that.
We just spoke to former Steelers first-round pick Ziggy Hood on the podcast, and he mentioned when he played in the Super Bowl, you're talking about a decade ago now, 2010, obviously every little thing and move on social media could be amplified because of the magnitude of the game. I mentioned in that first question, you guys didn't really live with that. So I just want you to kind of touch on the evolution of the game in that regard. Obviously, you were just coaching with the Arizona Cardinals as an outside linebacker coach, for those who weren't aware. What has it been like for you to just kind of see the evolution of the game intertwined with these guys on social media?
Yeah, I think now everybody understands that social media gives you a bigger platform. Even though being in the NFL gives you a big platform, even back in my time, it did. You were noticed. People knew who you were, but not globally. Mm-hmm. And you see that's what social media has done, is really brought all of us closer. And I'm sure you have people that you haven't been in touch with forever. Now you can be in touch with them in no time. And so that's what I think is the biggest difference. It's just that now you're more acceptable to everybody. At one point in time, we weren't. You had to be a close relative or a close friend to even have my phone number, right, or to get in touch with me. Now the fans can reach out and go into your personal space, and they know your girlfriend, they know your kids, they know your wife, they know you in and out, even more so on an intimate basis. So that's the difference. And quite frankly, that can be scary. Some guys use it to their advantage, but I also think that, we were probably glad we didn't have social media, because, there were some things that were kind of done that you probably don't want anybody to know about. So, yeah, I think it's tougher for the guys now. I think you have to really be careful of the way you conduct yourself and make sure that you're doing the right things, because if you slip up, or if you have a moment, everybody has a camera phone, and they can take that picture and they can record it and they can put you out on blast. So you have to really compliment the guys and how they take it, especially in this era, because I'm not quite sure we would have handled it as well.
It's interesting to hear you say that, obviously, because we hear a lot of players around the league, and specifically Steelers, obviously, here in Pittsburgh, that generally get a lot of slack because of social media use. So interesting to hear a former pro saying that, you think, you guys might have
handled it differently. Might bring some perspective to that for sure. Hey, some guys that you obviously didn't need social media to communicate with, you called them your brethren. You wrote a letter to them on Facebook recently. I was checking that out. Greg Lloyd, Chad Brown, and obviously the late Kevin Greene. You called yourself the originators of the Blitzburg defense. Obviously, I mentioned you guys raised a generation of Steeler fans. I read that letter on Facebook you wrote to them a little over a couple months ago. Can you elaborate just a little bit on what those relationships and maybe specifically Kevin Greene, the impact those guys had on your life?
Oh, yeah. Like I said before, a lot of times you have to be fortunate. You have to be blessed. I was really blessed to play with those three guys. We were all like-minded in a way. We came in at the perfect time, and we really complemented each other with our play. We were all different in our style of play, but Kevin and Greg really set the standard for me and Chad. Mm-hmm. And they helped us understood what it was to be a professional, what it was to be a man, and what it was to be a football player, to play on a high level. With Greg, you had to play on his level. He brought it all the time. And if you didn't play to his level, especially in that linebacker room when we were all together, you would have had hell to pay. And me and Chad were young guys. We were young guys. And, I was just, when I started, I was in my second year, and Chad came on later on that year as a rookie. And we understood that, man, we didn't want to be the weak links of the defense. And we're in important spots. We're in the middle of the defense. And we just didn't want to disappoint Greg. And we just didn't want to catch his wrath. And, Kevin was that constant professional that had a lot of knowledge, knew how to rush the passer, and it just really worked. We all had great ability, and it worked, and we got along pretty well. But I think what we did was we really pushed each other to be better. And when you have that, a brother in arm is a brother indeed. And we were brethren. And we were, we had the same mindset about getting it done. We had the same love of football, and we wanted to be champions. And a lot of times you may not have that combination of guys. So that's one of the things. That's one of the reasons why I wrote the letter. I wanted to thank them for being a part of my life. And unfortunately, Kevin passed away, and that was the whole point of my letter, was to make sure that those guys understood how I felt about them. And I hope that got across. And, that letter is going to be in a book, a collection. So, that was the reason why I did a thank you to those guys.
Well, it certainly was a very special quartet, you four, on an incredible Steelers defense in the 90s. I encourage Steeler fans today and followers of Yinzer Crazy who may have grew up with this generation's Steelers defense, the Joey Porters or James Ferriers, Ike Taylors of the world, to go back and check out these individuals who played in the 90s if you haven't already. Greatly encourage you to do that. Let's transition a little bit. We're talking with Levon Kirkland, former Steelers All-Pro linebacker in the 90s. I want to talk a little bit about this current Steelers group because obviously you were able to watch from afar, and I'm sure you're still keeping up, to a degree with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I heard you on Tiki and Tierney in December when the Steelers were 11-0 talking about they're probably not going to go undefeated. They're likely to trip up at some point, and I think we all felt that way. But we never knew they'd trip up to this fashion, Levon. 1-5 down the stretch. From your vantage point, man, what went wrong?
Well, like I always say, you have to be fortunate,
Yeah.
And, when I made that statement, I guess you have to watch what comes out of your mouth, because I was thinking maybe 1 or 2 losses, but I didn't know it was going to be collapsed like this.
Sure.
And when you get guys hurt, when you get a Devin Bush or Bud Dupree hurt, it really hurts the defense in a lot of ways. Now the protection could slide to Watts. So now you don't have 2 really good pass rushers. And that's really the key to a 3-4 defense, is that you got to have those edge rushers, those outside linebackers who can absolutely put pressure on the quarterback. And when you lose one of those guys, and even if you bring a guy in and it's not the same, you know?
Right.
It's really never the same. There's a reason why guys are starters, and there's a reason why you have guys who are backups. I'm not saying that the backups are bad and that they won't eventually start, but they're not quite ready to start. And then you lose a Devin Bush. I mean, that's tough too when you talk about your pass coverage and you're talking about stopping the run. So defense, they kind of lost a little bit. And you look on the offensive side, you know, the lack of having a running game really hurt them. They just couldn't really run the ball at all. And when you want to be a really good team to make some hay in the playoffs, you got to be multi-dimensional.
Yeah.
Because if you're not and you're just one-dimensional, then teams just key up on you and they just stop what you do best and they make you earn everything else. That's the reason why you want to be a team that's a dual threat. You can run and pass the ball. And I think that's what happened to the Steelers. And then you're relying on Ben, who's not the quarterback he used to be. You know, Ben can make things happen with his feet as well. He can prolong some plays. And Ben was really difficult to defend because he wasn't quite like most quarterbacks. He wasn't as mechanical. Now you see Ben Roethlisberger, in my opinion, that's more mechanical. He's more like, I'm going to get it out quick. So he becomes very predictable in the way he plays. So I think a combination of those things really hurt the Steelers down the stretch.
Well, if there's anybody that knows linebacking, it's a guy who did it for the better part of a decade with the Steelers, and of course recently coached the outside linebackers for the Arizona Cardinals, Levon Kirkland. Levon, a lot of individuals will talk about the Steelers maybe having an identity problem. You hear that often. I'm sure you get that question. Let's compare eras, right? It's not the 90s anymore. It's the 2020s. Things are different. But it sounds like from your perspective, they didn't as much have an identity problem as they just had kind of an injury problem, right? Would you say that's the case, or do you think Pittsburgh is when you look back at these 90s teams and of course go back to these 70s teams, you can't always have an all-pro, deep star-filled defense every single year. Do you think the team has an identity problem?
No, I didn't really think they had an identity problem. I thought, at first they were playing really well on defense, especially on defense. I was like, man, they're really running around. They're really causing a lot of havoc. They're bringing it from the edge. They got some guys who are playmakers on the back end. So I didn't think they had an identity problem. I just think they got injured.
Yeah.
And I think also their offense wasn't as productive. And if you think about defense in this way, defense is energy. Yeah, you want to be proactive, but you're doing a lot of reacting. The offense understands what they're doing. And so it takes a little bit more out of you to play defense. So if your offense isn't helping you out by sustaining drives, scoring touchdowns, giving you an opportunity to get some rest, then you're going to be worn out. I don't care how good you are.
No question.
I will always take a great offense over a great defense.
Right, especially in 2020 compared to
especially nowadays.
21, I should say.
Because the defense, not only the rules are really against the defense, and if somebody could just, if you can't generate any offense, you have to keep going back out there. And can you imagine always reacting, always spending energy? The offense know where they're going. You don't.
Right.
So you have to always kind of read what they're doing. And sometimes you can blitz and all that stuff and make it happen. But a lot of times you do have to react to routes, to running backs, to throws. So it takes a lot more energy to play defense than it does offense, if you would agree. I think that's true. So, if you can't establish yourself on both ends, then what end is going to suffer? And I think that's what happened to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think it was a loss of identity. They're aggressive defense. They're going to get after you. They're going to bring it on first or second down. They're going to try to put you behind the sticks, make it third and long so they can do their thing. But, they weren't able to do it down the stretch.
You're listening to the Yinzer Crazy podcast. We're talking to former Steelers legendary linebacker Levon Kirkland. Levon, I want to get you out of here on a couple things. You're obviously a very proud Clemson guy, a Lamar, South Carolina native. For those who don't know, you're in that Ring of Honor, and you're of course very proud of that, as I mentioned. I made a connection recently to the Steelers and Travis Etienne. I think he's a guy you draft and plug and play, and he's a home run threat immediately who can catch the ball out of the backfield and help that poor offensive line and help Ben Roethlisberger and things of that nature. Tell me a little bit about Travis Etienne from your vantage point.
It's so funny, the podcast that I do with Will,
sure,
we talked about that very exact thing, that Travis Etienne would be a perfect fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And
wow.
If you don't know much about Travis, let me tell you a little bit about him. The guy can run between the tackles. He has really great vision. He's a tough guy. He's harder to tackle than you would maybe. If you look at him, you may not think so, but he's a very hard guy to tackle. He has great balance. He's a home run hit. He can get the tough yards, and he's really improved as a receiver out of the backfield. I think as far as bringing the running game back, he will be perfect for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I really do. I really hope that the Steelers do draft this guy, because he is going to be a steal at the number that the Pittsburgh Steelers have. This guy is a dynamic running back, and if you watch him play, you see that. No matter if it's against the ACC opponents or against guys like Alabama or Ohio State, this guy can really tote the package, and he can bring it home for you. And I think that with Pittsburgh, he would fit in perfectly. So that's my opinion of Travis Etienne. He's a baller, and he's a guy that doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on his body, because in Clemson, he was out by the third quarter.
Right.
So the guy has speed, the guy has power, he can catch the ball out of the backfield. Only thing he may struggle with at first is picking up blitzes. But as far as a runner is concerned, he's probably, to me, he's the best running back coming out of the draft this year.
Well, we're completely on board with you there. We're starting the campaign, bring Etienne to Pittsburgh, and as you said, and a perfect play on words, he would be a steal for the Steel City, no question about it. Hey, last thing, Levon, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a blast. I want you to just kind of update our listeners, Pittsburgh fans, Steeler fans across the world who may be tuning in, just on kind of what you're doing today. I know you got some beautiful daughters, and tell us a little bit about the White Ribbon Project. I know that lung cancer awareness is something that's very near and dear to your heart.
Well, yeah, this is with Chris Draft, who his wife, which was named Keisha, my wife was named Keisha, they both passed away from lung cancer. And Chris Draft really did a great job of really getting people to be aware about lung cancer, because most people think of lung cancer, they think of people who smoke, and honestly, they probably think that, well, they deserve it. But the real truth about lung cancer is that anybody can get it, especially women. You don't have to be a smoker to get it. My wife was a non-smoker. His wife was a non-smoker. And when you think about lung cancer, you think about doom and gloom. So we try to really bring out the people who have survived lung cancer, who are living, and you just try to get more awareness. And Chris, and I have to give it more on Chris. Chris has done a tremendous job of really spreading that word, especially in NFL. And we've had opportunities where we bring people to football games, man, give them a treat. And he has done a tremendous job. So, yeah, my wife, that we were married for 11 years, had lung cancer, non-smoker, died like 5 years afterwards. It'll be 7 years since he's passed away. So yeah, I'm really an advocate for lung cancer and awareness of lung cancer, and it doesn't get the press that maybe breast cancer gets,
Sure.
or the sympathy that breast cancer gets. But trust me, it's a deadly disease, especially for women, and also for women who don't smoke. So we're just trying to make the awareness out there and help let people know that, you know, this can be cured and we can get after it, but you need to understand that it's not just a disease for smokers.
Well, it's very noble work by Chris and yourself, and we commend you on doing it, no question about it. We can't thank you enough for joining us over here in the Yinzer Crazy podcast. A great human and a former legendary Steelers linebacker, of course, Levon Kirkland. Thanks again, man. We can't wait for this to air, and we'll send it to you when it does. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
A huge thank you once more to Levon Kirkland, an absolute Steelers icon, for joining us here on the Yinzer Crazy Show. He said it. You know, they partly invented that Blitzburg defense. And, you know, I think the Steelers defense has taken some heat recently in the media with guys saying, you know, this Steelers defense should not be compared to the one of old. It's an excellent defense right now, but you could obviously make the argument that the teams in the 70s and this team in the 90s specifically with Levon Kirkland, Kevin Greene, Greg Lloyd, and Chad Brown, that is a high bar to meet. This Steelers defense, of course, has some superstars, T.J. Watt, Micah Fitzpatrick, Cameron Hayward, a terrific leader. But these defenses were absolutely incredible, and the defense he was on in the 90s rode the team all the way to the Super Bowl, despite Neil O'Donnell at quarterback. So that says a lot. And, of course, I want to thank him for opening up with us, talking a little bit about Kevin Greene, and, of course, the White Ribbon Project to help bring awareness, to the challenges that individuals face all the time surrounding cancer. This one specifically lung cancer, which has riddled his family, of course, with just a lot of heartbreak. His wife, as he mentioned, passing away a handful of years ago due to lung cancer. So make sure you check out the White Ribbon Project. Contribute anywhere you can, even if it's just listening to this podcast and sharing this podcast with a friend to help spread awareness. But yeah, once again, some very interesting things, talking about Travis Etienne, who he would love to see in the black and gold. I firmly agree with that assessment. I obviously think they need some offensive line help to go with it, but there are ways that they can try and find some help, hopefully in free agency potentially, if they do not draft somebody in the first round. But most of those things hinge around the fact that Ben Roethlisberger should be back at a lower salary to help free up some money to either address the offensive line or running back position in free agency that'll free him up to draft the other position in the first round. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for today's show. This is not somebody that I wanted to throw another guest on to, blemish this podcast whatsoever. This one was solely dedicated to the man, the myth, the legend himself, Levon Kirkland, who I think should be in the Hall of Fame, but currently is not. Alan Faneca will be in the Hall of Fame. That's cool. We learned that this past weekend. Former Steeler got the nod. Well-deserved, of course. All right, we hope you enjoyed our time here on the Yinzer Crazy Show. As always, I'm Mike. Find me at Mic'd Up Sports 1. You can also follow my co-founder, Jordan York, at Jordan York Music. And then us at Yinzer Crazy Show on Twitter. We're on Instagram at Yinzer_crazy. And we're on Facebook with our Yinzer Crazy groups with thousands of crazy Yinzers chiming in every single day. I want to thank Steel City Wheelhouse for their support. Make sure you check them out. They are on the up and coming in the Pittsburgh area, doing big things over there at Steel City Wheelhouse. We're going to keep doing big things over here at the Yinzer Crazy Show. We love Yins, and stay crazy.
I wish girls you love like to eat at Permane's. I wish every Steeler won a ring. Wish kids still learn to say ins and that, eat chip tam. I wish every state called them gumbags. I wish everybody knew all the words to renegade. I wish Monday mornings felt just like the Pirates won a game. And I wish every bar was like Saddle Ridge, and every film was like sudden death, and coolers never run out of icy light. And I wish the Pittsburgh Steelers never lost, and old Big Ben never got picked off. I wish the price of tickets were low and steel was high. I wish Southside bars didn't have no closing times. And I wish Yinzers never died.